So good afternoon, those of you who are joining us. My name is Dr. Choynowski, and I am the workshop presenter for today. We will wait for people to check in for a few more minutes, and then I'll get started. You will notice, as is standard for webinars, that your videos are off and you are muted, but don't worry, I'll have a Q&A session at the end of this panel section, so then we can sit down and really get to grips with any questions you might have for me personally. But in the meantime, please do enter your details into the chat if you want to say hello to each other, announce where you're from, and we can engage there as well. We'll just wait for another couple of minutes because it's not quite 2 o'clock, so we'll probably start a few minutes past 2 just to give people a chance to sign in. In the meantime, I do hope you have had a good time at F.O.R.M and enjoyed some of the other panels. I've just got back to Dubai from Abu Dhabi, and I have to say it's been a really, really great session. I'm a little tired now, I'm not going to lie. It's been a long couple of days, but it's been a very fruitful conference, and we're thrilled to have had so many people join us from across the world. Almost 700 people from around 50 countries have joined us from across the world over the last 3 days. So it's really great to see so many people engaging with so many of these really important topics. For those of you who have just joined us, just a quick reminder, your cameras are off and you are muted, but you can say hello to each other in the chat and let us know where you're from. And also there will be a Q&A session at the end of this panel. We have a nice long Q&A session as well, so that we can really get to grips with predatory journals and predatory conferences, which is a particular hot topic right now in general, and particular interest of mine, which is why I'm delighted to be giving you this workshop today. So we're still coming up to 2 o'clock, so bear with me. We will start properly in a few minutes. For those of you, as I said, who are just joining, please do reach out on the chat. We'd love to hear from you, both welcoming each other and talking to each other during the event on the chat, but also if you have any additional queries or comments that you wish to make, please do put them in the chat at any point during this session. So we'll just give it 1 more minute and then we'll get started. So again, for those of you who are just joining us, you are muted and your video is off, but don't worry, you'll have a chance to engage at the end of the session in the Q&A. And in the meantime, please do add your information into the chat. Also, anything that I referenced during the discussion, if there are outside links or activities, again, please do look in the chat for those. The additional information will be placed there for you. Right. I think we can get started now. We've got a bit of housekeeping slides first, so if anyone comes in late, they won't miss much. So just as I mentioned before, we are having a Q&A session. So for questions, if you have questions for me that you wish to ask me at any point during the talk, I'll address all of them at the end. But please do take care to put them in the Q&A section. So that's the, in the taskbar at the bottom, that is the section with 2 speech bubbles, because that's where I'm going to be looking for questions. But the chat itself is for you to introduce yourself, to say if you have any technical issues, and also to engage with each other. In addition, as a delegate, you should have received an invitation to join our online Slack community. So that is where a lot of the discussions will be happening, not only today and over the past few days around key themes addressed in the conference, but also going forwards. We are maintaining the Slack community for the region and for the wider global open science community in perpetuity. So it really will be worth signing up, and you will be able to engage with other people interested in this area, suffering similar challenges, coming up with similar solutions. So please do consider joining. So that's the housekeeping bit out of the way, and now we can move on. So to introduce myself, I am the Chief Academic Officer at Knowledge, which is a Dubai-based organization, for those of you who don't know, providing scholarly content, digital resources, publishing services, and educational trainings to a wide range of institutions and academic bodies across the world, but with a specific emphasis on the Arab region. I am also the Director of Operations for the Forum for Open Research in MENA and the main conference organizer for this second annual conference. And a little bit of background about me personally and why I'm qualified to give this workshop today. So I received my PhD way back in 2012 in English literature and Middle Eastern religions. And I then moved into the research publishing sector, working first for two world-class macroeconomic research publishers, and then in the open access academic publishing sector. I'm also an independent academic and regularly publish in the field of 19th century literature and culture. And I sit on the editorial boards of a leading literature journal and a university press. And today I want to talk about how we can identify and avoid some of the predators stuck and lurking in the scholarly ecosystem. Now, as I mentioned, as part of my role, I manage Knowledge's open access publishing division, and we've provided world-class open access publishing and consultancy services to researchers and academic institutions across the Arab states and the wider global south since 2016. And we're a trusted partner and regional ambassador for both Crossref and ORCID, and we're also members of OASPA and the Association of Learned Professional and Society Publishers. We are part of Open Citations and the Open Abstracts Initiative. Obviously, we're a member of F.O.R.M, and we're also signatories of the Coalition for Diversity and DORA. And really importantly, something I'm particularly proud of, we are the first publisher in the UAE to sign the UN Sustainable Development Goals Publishers Compact, and we were also the 5th publisher in the entire region. And I mention all of this because a few years ago, we started participating in the International Open Access Week, which is obviously this week. And one of our regular activities was to create and distribute an annual quiz on open access for the region. And I mention this now because I think it really sets the stage for what we're going to discuss today, or at least for part of it, because the aggregated results from the last 3 years of the quiz offer some very interesting insights into the perceptions of open access, which are relevant to today's talk. Because when we aggregate those results, a worrying trend starts to emerge. Almost 20% of respondents don't fully understand what open access is, and a further 15% aren't aware of the benefits. 48% of respondents don't know about the different tiers of open access, green, gold, and diamond, and so on, and what each tier means for them. And rather worryingly, 50% of respondents didn't realize that authors retain their own copyright in open access publications. And most concerningly of all, for what we're talking about today, 35% did not fully understand what article processing charges, APCs, were and what services should be included. You know, what are you actually paying the publisher for? And when we move from basic knowledge to perceptions, the responses are even more concerning. Because although many respondents might make use of open access materials, they don't trust them. Almost 16% thought open access research was not only low quality and fake, but also not peer reviewed. 18% thought that any journal charging an APC, the article processing charge, was a predator. And finally, 26% of respondents thought open access was actually synonymous with predatory practices, as in the term open access means predatory. And what these charts really reflect is that there is a really profound misunderstanding and mistrust of open access in the region, and an entrenched assumption that open access is predatory, a predatory movement designed to steal money in research, and that thus all open access content is inherently low quality. Now, obviously, everyone participating in the forum and with us here today obviously knows that this is not the case, or at least I really hope you do. Open access publications and open science in general is designed to ensure that everyone, everywhere, has access to the best, most cutting-edge research and data. Unfortunately, however, the growth of the open science movement has had a terrible unintended consequence, and one which has major ramifications for the global scientific community and the general public, namely the rise of predatory practices. ranging from fake page-published journals, paper mills, ghost authorship, and citation manipulation to predatory conferences. And all of these activities seriously threaten our academic integrity, corrupt and contaminate the global knowledge base, and undermine the advancement of the inclusive, accessible, and sustainable research and education models which the open science movement was designed to propagate. It's therefore vitally important that we spread awareness about these predators, learn to identify their increasingly sophisticated techniques, and, crucially, ensure that we and our colleagues avoid them at all costs. Now, I spent the last 2 days at the annual Forum for Open Research in Abu Dhabi, and unsurprisingly, open access and predatory practices were very hot topics. And I've had a number of conversations with librarians and research office officials at various institutions about the difficulties they face in dealing with predatory publishing, which broadly fall into 3 categories. There are the difficulties that they face as content gatekeepers, seeking to preserve scientific integrity of their library collections and prevent bad science and poor quality research entering the catalogue. There are the difficulties that they face as financial gatekeepers in charge of disbursing money for APC fees and conference attendance, when it is increasingly hard to identify the legitimate from the predatory and the good from the bad. And finally, there are the difficulties these individuals face, and the officers as wholes, in their role as educators, instructing faculty and students in scholarly communications ecosystems, especially where and how to publish. And I think these anxieties really set the scene for what I want to talk about today, highlighting the huge threat which predatory practices pose for the global research community, and drawing attention to the lack of awareness about these practices amongst key stakeholder groups. And finally, providing practical guidance on how to identify and avoid these predators. So let's get started. Now, as this is a workshop, it's not just about me talking to you for the next hour. So I want to be able to engage with you all and understand your views and experiences as well. And to do that, I'd like to start with a short online activity. You're probably all familiar with Mentimeter, the online quiz tool. So please, if you could get out your phones and go to www.mentimeter.com and type in the code or scan the QR code here on the screen, and then we'll get started. I'm just going to move my speech bubble a bit in case it's blocking it for anyone. So I'm just going to leave this up for a couple of seconds while you type in, and then we can start to read through the questions and look at the answers, which I'm very interested to see. As I said, this is completely anonymous, so hopefully it will work. Everyone will reply. Sorry, yes?
Dr. Emily, just to let the participant know, there is all information shared in the chat. So you can just click on the link in the chat or use menti.com and use the code 28829540 to access the activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. So now the details are in the chat. Perhaps we can go over, we'll start reading out the questions. Laurie, if you could please go to the first question. So, my questions.
Can you see my screen properly, Dr. Emily?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Sorry, the chat popped up. So the first question said is, do you think you might have been a victim of predatory practices? That's interesting. So far, 6 of you think no, but 1 of you has been a victim of them. It is increasingly hard to just identify. That's part of what we're going to talk about today, is that the problems that one has. Now, I can see that there are quite a few participants who have logged on, but currently only 7 of you have filled in the answers. Please do take the time to answer them. This is more useful for me to see where you are within the context of this discussion, but also it's useful data for us to collect and make sure everyone stays awake while I talk at you. So as we move on to the next question, I would ask that all the participants please do join us in this discussion. So the next question is, even if you haven't been involved in a victim of predatory practices, do you know anyone who might have been? Now, what you'll need to do on your Mentimeter is refresh the button on that Menti slide. So use the same link and press refresh, and you can go through and see the next question. Now, don't be shy. I know there's quite a few of you online here, so we'd like to hear from all of you, please. And thank you to the 7 who have actually filled it these answers. Okay, so again, yeah, so obviously while you yourselves are obviously more knowledgeable, you quite a few of you do seem to know people who it has happened to. Now, the next question is, someone needs the link, please, according to the chat. Now, the next question is, this one's really important. I really, you know, we need more of you to sign in and jump straight to this question. This is a word cloud. So it'll give us some points to discuss going forwards. And my colleague Elena has put the answer for the chat. Once again, the link for this Menti quiz is in the chat. Please do click on there and you can access it. And again, you'll need to refresh the answers as we go. But it's very interesting to know what you all think. So why do you think researchers publish in predatory journals or attend predatory conferences? Both, it doesn't need to be from personal experience, it could be what you've heard, or just, you know, thinking about this topic in a bit more detail, what you think it might have been. Yes, easy to publish, that is true. They want to take our money, so they make it very easy. That is one of the big ones. And the speed, yes, the speed is a big one. Easy to publish, popping up again. Easy acceptance, fast to publish. By mistake, thank you. Yes, this is part of what we're going to talk about. It's very hard to identify some of these journals. They can look incredibly legitimate without further scrutiny. So yes, and also you can enter more than one answer. This is a word cloud, so if you have other things beyond the initial point you've made, please do add those in too. And as I said, please don't be shy to our participants. We would love to hear from all of you on this, so please do log in if you can. But yeah, guaranteed publishing is another one. The whole concept of paid publishing and the pretense of peer review without it being there is such a big point. And lack of knowledge, thank you, that's what we're trying to address today. And we're not alone in this, there are a number of initiatives doing that. Promotion, that's again another key point that we will be discussing. It's one of the big problems with the current, it was discussed a lot yesterday, in particular during the panels yesterday, is the fact that institutions are so locked in on Scopus rankings and Scopus Impact and Times Higher Education rankings that they're forcing academics to publish anywhere they can just to keep their jobs, just to get those promotions. Rejection, you don't know how, cost again, promotion by mistake, knowledge. Yeah, I think all of these, these are all the core, very much the core points. And then next question, please. I'm quite interested in this one as well. This is something that I think is often overlooked, and it's something I'll pull out in more detail in a few slides' time, is what the danger of these practices. I think people often fall into the mistake of thinking that, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't hurt anyone if I, you know, give my money to these predators. But as we'll see shortly, it really has profoundly negative consequences for an awful lot of the academic ecosystem. So I'd love to know what you all think about those, what the biggest danger is for the individual researchers. Anyone have any answers? No, no one has any answers?
We are still waiting at the moment.
Yay, answers. Yes, thank you. Both of those. There was yes. Well, the data used by others. Yes, that's a good point, because if it's corrupt data, if it's bad, if it's not been peer reviewed properly, that is a problem. The contamination of the knowledge base, the global knowledge base, is a huge concern. We very much saw it in COVID with the rapid publication, which on the one hand did obviously facilitate that incredibly rapid sequencing of the genome and the creation of the cure, but also saw the propagation of spurious, suspicious, shall we say, publications and data that then has entered the global permanent knowledge base, and people now think that that's legitimate data, legitimate views, well researched, and it isn't. Research isn't permanent, thank you, that's another one. It's one of those things that is, again, often overlooked, is the archiving, you know, whether it's Locks or Portico, one of those, it's one of those things that credible publishers are supposed to provide, and it's definitely one of the corners that is cut by some of the predators as opposed to the legitimate people. Credibility, prestige, reputation, yes, all of those are poor, unfortunately, particularly now as many journals are starting to look at the previous publication portfolios of authors, and if you have been published in a predatory journal, regardless of whether or not you knew about it, a number of journals will never accept content by you again. So it is a huge problem. Ethics, of course, there is big ethical questions about publishing in these predatory journals. So, okay, that's good. And then we have one more question, which is from the flip side. So this is about the dangers for the individual researchers, but what about the danger of predatory practices for the wider academic community? Now, obviously there is some overlap in this, but it would be very interesting to see your take on not just the individuals, if we publish, what's the badness for us, but what does it mean for everyone? We'll just wait and see what everyone says. And thank you again for all of you who have chosen to join us and engage with us on this. It is very useful to see what people do. Yes, lack of quality control, that is true. It is very difficult for people to find the right research. Misguided by the wrong info, again, yes, it's the contamination of the knowledge base is such a problem, and the erosion of trust in science as a benchmark of truthfulness, of accuracy, of credibility. Low quality information and data, yes, again, it's all coming back into that contamination of that sort of global knowledge base. Trust, thank you. Trust is so important. As academics, we rely on journals. If we see something in a journal, we're trusting the journal, but also the wider community, medics, architects, politicians, they're relying on what we publish to make decisions, to make calculations, to do things. And if we're publishing poor quality content, there's huge potential dangers for everyone. So thank you very much. I think that was a nice little start for us to get started. And so now we will go back to, I'm just going to share my screen again, and I will go back to my slides. So hopefully you can all see my my slides. Yes,
yes.
Okay. Brilliant. So we'll just skip on. So now I believe that to fully understand the scale of the problem of predatory activities in the research ecosystem, we need to take a step back and look at how the system has changed in the last 10 to 15 years, and look at the emerging pressures on institutions and their research faculty, and see how those have contributed to the explosion in predatory practices. And I'd like to start with the individual researchers producing new studies, presenting them at conferences and publishing them in journals. Because showcasing research, distributing new findings to the wider community, first at conferences and then in journals or books, is the essential component of the scientific endeavour. As researchers, we work for years to produce publishable material. It affirms the value of our research, our work. It allows us to engage with our peers and contribute to discussions and debates within our field. It's also necessary for us to get jobs, to get promotions, and to get funding. Therefore, as academics, we devote hours and hours of our lives to conducting research and writing it up. And this can take months, even years. And as soon as it's finished, of course, we want to get it presented and published, and we want that quite quickly. But traditional publishing models take time. And this particular cartoon here is, I love this cartoon because I have this conversation with my husband the whole time about my research. Like, this whole cycle of this conversation is literally what happens in my house. So I really appreciate it. And as a journal editor and as a publishing academic, I know firsthand not only how long it takes to find a peer reviewer in the review process, but also how long it takes to do the work required for publication production. And one example of this is, so in December 2022, so almost a year ago now, I had an article published, which I'd actually submitted for evaluation back in January 2020. The journal sent an automated email on my submission saying they would organise peer review and let me know their initial decision within 12 months. So a whole year. And they were completely upfront about it. And I was like, that's fine. My expectations are managed. I know where we're going. Then the process of making the changes and resubmitting took another 8 months. as there was sort of back and forth peer review responses and little tweaks. Then the article was formally accepted. However, then the next stage of the process starts, when my manuscript was passed over to the journal's publisher, and production takes another 6 months on top of the 20 months that had already passed. And then there's actually a further stage after publication, which the authors aren't aware of, which is it can take another 2 to 3 months for that content to be indexed, to become discoverable and visible online and available for everyone else to read in citations, if you're looking for it anywhere else than the journal's own website. And as I said, I've worked in publishing for the last 10, 12 years, so I fully appreciate why it takes so long. And there's many stages of work. There's the copy editing and the typesetting and the galley proofs and physical printing and binding, the creation of online HTML content, the registration and deposit of each article's metadata, and all of that prior to submitting the whole issue to the various indexes to ensure discoverability. So, I understand why this is happening. But although, as the author, I will receive a digital or print copy, if the publisher's nice, as soon as my article is published, many other researchers won't be able to read it at all unless their local library subscribes to that journal and either has a physical copy in their collection or has online access. Therefore, my brilliant idea, the idea which I have spent years working on and writing up, and then almost a further 2 years getting published, will be locked behind a paywall and only read by a handful of researchers working at institutions with enough money to pay for the subscription. Now, this is fine for me. I'm a literature scholar, so my research has quite a long shelf life anyway, so I'm able to take a longer-term view of things. But also, as an independent academic, I don't have publishing quotas for my job or my promotion. My academic pursuits, my hobby rather than my profession. So the speed of publication is not a problem for me. But it's different for professional researchers such as yourselves, because some of you might have time constraints and quotas to fill. Others need to publish to get a job or advance to the next stage of your careers. Some of you are publishing content in rapidly changing landscapes, and publication delays risk research redundancy. Meanwhile, others are publishing medical and scientific developments that could potentially save lives, and therefore publication delays and paywalls could have a dangerous, potentially fatal consequences. Therefore, as we all know, over the past few years, governments, research institutions, and funding bodies have sought to address these issues, and their efforts have been supported by digital developments that facilitate rapid online access to research content. And the result has been a profound change in publishing models and indeed the entire scholarly communication system, namely the emergence of the open access movement. Now, this refers to digital publications that offer free and easily accessible scholarly research to readers. And this publishing model, as I'm sure you all know, differs greatly from traditional publishing models, which require readers to pay an often substantial subscription fee or to be affiliated with a major academic body, such as a university or library, to be able to access research published in their journals. And at this point, before we go on, I'd like to just another little Menti quiz to test some of your knowledge. So once again, if you could take out your phones and scan or type the QR code, and the details again will also be in the chat with the little link, so you can just click on the link in the chat, which will have been placed there as well. And I'll leave this up for a couple of seconds, and then we can skip over and start looking at your answers. So
the details are in the chat, and Dr. Emily, I'm going to share.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Laurie. So brilliant. The first question was, what is open access? And it's a nice multiple choice question. Yes, so far 2 of you have answered. Again, please, all of you, please do try and participate, not least to help you stay awake, because I'm going to talk at you for a while, and this is a nice way to break things up. Well, as everyone seems to be feeling shy and doesn't want to come and play the games, we will skip on to the next question for now. So the next question is true or false? Making research articles openly accessible significantly increases the number of times they are cited by academic research. Now I have the actual statistic on this, which I will give you, and you might be surprised at the number. But yes, 2, 3. Anyone else going to answer? Do log on and come and join us.
Yes. I'm sorry, Dr. Emily. I just want to remind the participant, please check the chat. There is the link, because we have many participants in the room and only 5 are answered so far. So just click on the link that is in the chat so you can access the poll. Thank you very much.
We'll give you guys another couple of seconds to log on. Great. Laurie, if you would show the correct answer, please.
I'm sorry, Dr. Emily, you cannot see.
I was saying, if you press enter at the bottom, you can show the correct answer. Not next slide, just yes, there we go. There we go, brilliant. Yes, so true, that is correct. Making research articles does increase the number of citations. In fact, recent studies have shown that open access increases citations by 18%, which is a huge amount. That's almost 20% increase just by publishing in an open access journal instead of behind a paywall. And also it's quicker, because it's not just, what we have to remember is I publish an article, someone reads it, they make a note of it, they're working on something else, they publish an article, again for them, it might be in 3 years' time before my article, the citation has that impact. So the quicker you have people reading your content from the beginning, the moment it is online and they can access it completely from a Google search and everything else, the much quicker you'll start to be having that all-important impact. So next question, please. Now this one is another, it's an interesting one. So it'd be good to know, what do you all think can be published open access? Is it just peer-reviewed journal articles? Can non-peer-reviewed journal articles be published open access? Conference papers? Or is it everything? So I know that there are quite a few of you online, so please do try and log in and answer. Oh, there's a good consensus here. This is nice. I like seeing all of this. No one else is going to answer. Laurie, if you show the correct answer. Yes, thank you. All of you are correct. Well done. Gold stars for everyone. Next question, please. So true or false? With gold open access, the author retains copyright. Now, this is an interesting one. It's one that we have pops up a lot. It's actually one of the key ways of identifying a predatory publisher. Because a number of predatory publishers, because they don't understand, which is good for us, or because they don't care about appropriate things, they send copyright forms when you're publishing with them. And that's actually a really interesting way of identifying that they are predatory, is if you are sent a form to sign over your copyright and also sent an invoice for the APC charges. You should never be paying and giving them your copyright, because what are you paying them for then? So Laurie, if you would show the correct answer, please. Yes, once again, you are all correct. Well done. Now, finally, and the next question is, I think, the most important one. Oh, yeah, one after one. Yeah, this one's also important. Sorry, I thought we were on number 6 there. So true or false, open access journals are not peer-reviewed? Ooh, interesting. Show the correct answer, please, Laurie. Yes, so it is false. Open access journals, if they're legitimate open access journals, they will be peer reviewed. The key thing to remember is that an open access journal is a journal. It is it should be, the legitimate ones should be everything that a subscription-based journal is. They should be high quality, peer reviewed, with active and engaged editorial boards, scopes with strong core values and unique propositions and unique offers to the scholarly community. They should be the kind of things that you want to read, and therefore the kind of things you want to publish in. Yes, there are bad journals out there, and we will be talking about those bad predatory journals, but the real journals, the real legitimate open access journals, have everything and offer everything that your traditional subscription journal offers. In fact, arguably they offer more because they offer everything that subscription journal model offers, and they give you fast publication, immediate global visibility. They're actually better for you if they're run properly and run by credible, legitimate entities, not predatory publishers. So finally, if we could go on to the last question, please. And that question is, what should authors expect from open access publishers? So this comes back to it. If you're publishing with a publisher, regardless of whether they're subscription or open access, what is it you should be demanding? What are you offering? If it's Diamond, you're not offering the money, but you're still publishing your research. But particularly if you're paying APCs, if you're going for a gold open access model, what are you paying for? What should you demand from them? It's nice to see everyone you're all very demanding, and I like to see that. Good. Yes, peer review is one of them, but actually the answer is all of the above. There is nothing that a traditional subscription journal model publisher is giving you that you are not also getting from an open access publisher, with the obvious exception of a tangible print copy. Other than that, everything, whether it's copy editing, peer review, DOIs, ISSNs, all of it, that is what you should be getting from your online publisher, your open access publisher. Now, if they're Diamond, you won't be paying for it, but the journal owner will be covering the cost. But particularly if they are a gold publisher and they are asking fees, and let's face it, some publishers are charging an awful lot, it is imperative that you make sure that you are getting your money's worth, or your university's money's worth, because otherwise you're just giving money to someone and receiving nothing in return. So I will go back to sharing my screen now, and we will resume the presentation. Okay.
Yes, we can see.
Yes, brilliant. So let me just close down a couple of windows that are lurking there. So open access was presented as an alternative model to traditional publishing, as we've said, with the internet era allowing for more global accessibility than ever before. And it provides academics with the opportunity to develop healthier research ecosystems built on a mutual goal to make the world a better place through scientific discovery. And there's so many benefits to open access, but the biggest one for individual researchers, and the one that we're going to talk about today, is the fact that, as I've said already, more people can access and read our research, and this translates into more citations and greater impact. But publishing content, even online-only content, still costs money. And I say this as a publisher as well, especially if academic standards and requirements are going to be met, such as DOIs and indexing. So if researchers aren't paying for the articles, the money has to come from somewhere. Obviously, money has to come from somewhere. And this means that either the journal owner pays for the production fees or the author does. And the question of where the money comes from has resulted in different types of open access depending on who is paying for the production and publication service. For example, Diamond open access, as I mentioned, means the journal or a funder pays, like the journal owner. Gold open access means the author pays. Now, someone might be giving that money to the author, but it's the pay point is effectively author is the B2C customer of the publisher. And green open access means the author pays to include a copy of the article in an institutional repository accessible after an embargo. Now, sometimes the author doesn't have to pay for green OA, and sometimes they do. Some publishers are nicer than others on that score, I guess. Unfortunately, however, while the digitization of scholarly communication and the ongoing development of open access models have undoubtedly revolutionized many aspects of scientific endeavor, creating exciting new avenues for the access and dissemination and production of knowledge, they have also paved the way for predators. Because money has attracted these predators as shifting paradigms of research communication, evaluation, peer review, institutional rankings, metrics, and business models have created more space for these predatory academic practices to take root and thrive. And according to a brilliant new report released by the Inter-Academy Partnership last year, features of predatory journals include rapid pay-to-publish models without rigorous peer review, fake editorial boards falsely listing respected scientists, fraudulent impact factors, journal titles that are deceptively similar to those of legitimate journals, paid review articles that promote fake science, and aggressive spam invitations to submit articles specifically outside of a researcher's expertise. Meanwhile, predatory conferences are also a growing threat. In fact, they are sometimes actually arranged by the predatory publishers. And identifying features include a lack of peer review of submitted abstracts, false high fees, false claims to partners and plenaries, and inviting researchers to speak on topic areas outside of their areas of expertise. And sometimes the conferences don't even take place, but no refunds are given. Now, these predators are motivated by profit rather than scholarship, and they solicit research through actions that exploit the pressure on researchers to publish and present their work to their peers. It used to be that a handful of publications, or possibly even a single monograph book, was enough to secure tenure. All you had to do was publish once or twice in total, and you were safe. You had a long-term job. But then the volume of published work increased. Then the nature of the publication was redefined following the launch of the citation indexes, a very recent introduction in the context of the entire scholarly history. Formerly it was you just published to share your work with other people and get feedback. But then it's in order to obtain and retain, so not just to get that job, but to keep that job as a researcher, you have to constantly be publishing new research, ideally in a Scopus Index journal, and presenting at a lot of conferences. And the pressure on us to publish continues to grow every year. And in turn, so do the number of predators waiting to take advantage. But why are predatory practices growing so rapidly, particularly in the last few years? Now, generally, there are believed to be four key drivers for this. First of all, increasing commercialization of the scholarly communications ecosystems. Secondly, the rise of quantity over quality researcher KPIs and an institutional obsession with ranking systems. Third, the lack of transparency surrounding peer review processes and a growing crisis in reviewer availability that is causing huge delays in the ability for journals to respond and publish in a timely manner. And finally, fourthly, that conferences are increasingly seen as a publishing opportunity because researchers don't want to waste research on non-publishing opportunities, as their universities often only fund conference attendance if there will be a publication at the end. This, coupled with COVID and the sort of resultant trend towards hybrid and virtual conferences, has fueled an exponential growth in predatory conferences. So how big a problem is it? Now, many of you will have heard of Cabell's, who keep a list of predatory journals, and their most recent report estimates that there are nearly 17,000. 17,000, that's a huge number, predatory journals currently operating across the world, and more are being established every single week by unscrupulous companies trying to steal money from researchers. Interestingly, another study has calculated that there are over 13,000 articles in Scopus which were published in predatory channels. So even Scopus, a perceived barometer of legitimacy and credibility, has already been contaminated, and not just a little bit, but a huge extent. That's a huge amount of potential predatory material and therefore low quality, unpeer-reviewed content that has already contaminated the knowledge base. Meanwhile, new research by scholars has suggested that the number of predatory conferences publicized each year actually outweighs the number of real academic conferences. So that means there are more predatory conferences in the world right now than there are real conferences. Again, that's huge when you think how many legitimate conferences there are. And overall, the IAP, the Inter-Academy Partnership report, estimates that every year over 1.2 million researchers succumb to predatory practices, with wastage of billions and billions of dollars of research budgets. Now, originally, these predatory practices are, supposedly, according to studies, largely restricted to African and Asian academia. according to a 2020 study on this topic. But in the last 3.5 years since COVID, predatory practices are spreading like wildfire. They're becoming particularly problematic in affluent oil-rich countries, particularly the GCC region, which is another article on that topic recently. Moreover, and more importantly, the predators are no longer unsophisticated thieves preying on ignorant young scholars. They are incredibly sophisticated, incredibly hard to detect, and also increasingly reputable institutions and senior academics are inadvertently being scammed, or worse, are being knowingly complicit in these operations. But why does it matter? I mean, if everyone's getting published, everyone's visible online, surely it's all, fine, no one cares. Wrong. Predatory publishing is bad for the academic community because it encourages the circulation of bad science, and some of you mentioned that in the quiz. COVID, as you saw before, in particular, really highlighted both the need for accessible research, but also the importance of ensuring that that research is peer-reviewed, properly peer-reviewed. If it needs to, it goes through multiple cycles of revise and resubmit before being published. Because as the pandemic intensified, poor quality research was rapidly published without peer review, and it was picked up by the media, and hugely, hugely dangerous consequences for people as it was promoted to the general public. Now, I'm a publisher, as I mentioned, and I know the physical production, even if it's only for open access, it takes time and it costs money. There's copy editing, as we said, typesetting, proofing, DOI creation and deposit, and a host of other stages necessary to make content ready for publication. And even if you forego these time-consuming elements, there's still peer review. So on the other side, I sit on various editorial boards for journals and book series and various academic bodies, and I'm regularly asked to review work. And sometimes, even when I do have time and I make the time, I can never turn it around by, next week or tomorrow. We're all very busy. So I was asked to review something in December, and they approached me at the start of December and wanted it at the end of December, and I was like, it's not going to happen. I eventually delivered it in March because that's when I had time, and that's totally normal. That's how we all review, we all contribute in that way to the scholarly ecosystem. And it's never something you can get asked on Monday and deliver it by Tuesday, because we have lives and we have existing commitments. So if a journal is promising ridiculously fast publication, you have to ask yourself how they can achieve this while they still provide full peer review. And the answer is they can't. And this lack of a peer review results in poor science being openly disseminated. And it's not just contaminating the global knowledge base, as we've said, it damages public trust in the scientific community. It wastes public funds. And dangerously, it will be read and repeated, as we already mentioned, by other researchers who believe it is true because they believe it has undergone peer review. And without this trust, and with all of the sort of confusion that surrounds this, we cannot grow and develop as individual researchers or as research institutions, because without trust in our science, without trust in open access, we cannot make open science a reality. We cannot develop those inclusive and accessible research and education models. So predatory practices aren't just a threat for the individual and for academia, they're a threat to anyone who wants to advance open science across the world. In addition, as we mentioned before, there is a very specific and very real threat for you as researchers. You lose the chance to benefit from expert peer review insights, and I find peer review the most valuable part of the writing process. I get so much from it, and it's the best part of the publication. It's the real value you get. So you won't get that if you don't get peer review, if you don't have a proper publisher. You'll miss the opportunity to have work in a more reputable and widely indexed journal. Don't forget, we can only publish one thing once. Once it's published, it's gone. You can't republish it anywhere else. And you've wasted that opportunity to build your reputation and showcase yourself. You often lose money in the process. If you're not getting your money's worth, you may as well have set fire to it. You're not getting anything, really. And also, as I touched on earlier, one of the big things, and it's something that a lot of academics aren't actually aware of, but it is becoming increasingly prevalent, is that some journals are now taking a stand against predators. And they can't stop the predators themselves publishing, but what they can do is no longer publish any author who has already published with a predator. So regardless of whether or not you knew that it was a predatory publisher, if you publish with them, you might have potentially very severe damage to your long-term publication and career prospects, because other legitimate journals will no longer work with you ever again. So that's a really, really important thing that I don't think it's talked about enough currently. And I think that's one of the most important ways that condoning and participating yourself in predatory practices, I think it's the biggest danger for the individual. So, given all these negative factors, why are more researchers than ever before still publishing with predatory journals and still attending predatory conferences? And in its recent survey, the IAP asked exactly this question. And here are some of the answers. Lack of awareness, career advancement pressures, fast and cheap, and peer pressure. Now, unfortunately, we can't change points 2, 3, and 4 overnight, although there are a number of organizations such as DORA and Quora and various others working to make those long-term improvements. But where we can help, where I want to help today, is with point 1, the lack of awareness. So today, for the rest of the session, I'm going to give some tips and hints on how to identify and avoid those predators, so you don't waste your money and you don't waste your research. Now, I'm going to start with the ones who are easier to identify and easier to avoid, because I think we are in general more familiar with them, and that is the predatory journals. Now, in order to identify predatory publishers, we need to fully understand the nature of predatory publishing. And the standard definition here that's currently accepted globally is taken from an article in Nature, which states that predatory journals and publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship and are characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, a lack of transparency, and or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. And I'm sure we've all had some of those, and I'll show you some examples shortly. Now, this initially seems like a pretty clear and helpful definition. They focus on money, they give false information, they don't follow best practice, they don't tell us what's going on, and they ask everyone to publish with them. But actually, while accurate, this definition doesn't actually give that much in the way of practical information, because how are you going to identify these things? So how can we tell from the outside if a journal only cares about money, rather than the preservation and dissemination of rigorously reviewed scientific knowledge? After all, even the best journals charge high publication fees for open access publication. I mean, for example, Nature, one of the Springer Nature journals, can charge up to $11,000 to publish a single article. So charging money for publication in and of itself, even if really high, is not by itself an indication of predatory practices. Hypothetically, false information should be easy to identify and verify, but what type of information are we worried about? Like, there's so much stuff on the journal page, it's really hard to work out which the important bits, which bits do we need to go and try and spend the time to verify. Decide whether or not a journal is following international publishing standards and ethics. It requires you to not only have an in-depth knowledge of those standards and ethics as they apply to authors, reviewers, editorial boards, and publishers, but also a lot of that activity is happening behind the scenes, and it's never going to be visible to you anyway, unless you are actually standing over the publisher while they publish your article. So it makes it even harder for those transgressions to be identified. Likewise, it can be very difficult to tell if a journal is being secretive or obstructive, especially if you're unfamiliar with conventional transparent processes. Arguably, therefore, perhaps the easiest characteristic to identify is the one that seems the hardest on the surface. They ask everyone to publish, because we all know our own subject fields, and even if we don't always know the right journal for our research, we can easily identify when we're being approached by a journal that apparently publishes in a completely different field or publishes no one that you've ever heard of. And I'm sure we've all had one of those delightfully flattering letters praising a previous piece of research in glowing terms and imploring us to consider publishing in journal XYZ. And these letters often represent the starting point of your interactions with these predators. So I'm going to start here as well, and I'm going to show an example. This is an example of an email I received it a couple of months ago, but to be honest, I get 2 or 3 of these every day. And just to highlight some of the tricks and that the predatory publishers use. So first of all, they've given me an unknown title, professor, so that I'm flattered and feel really important. Secondly, they've referenced something I've published previously. Now, yes, this is a real article in a Scopus Index journal, but it's obvious they've never read the piece, as it's actually simply, it's not an article, it's an entry, it's a little report I did of a cultural activity at a conference, which was published in the review section of the journal for those who couldn't attend, as a sort of a cultural interest thing. So it's not actually academic research at all, and it's definitely not groundbreaking enough to attract reputable academic journal editors. Now, then they've given an outright lie here. They have said this paper has attracted widespread attention and interest from researchers in the field of literature and arts. They basically said that this article, which isn't even an article, is so amazing, so magnificent that everyone's talking about it. And now they do this to try and make their email soliciting a submission seem plausible, but it's an obvious lie. Next, they try, in very bad English, to encourage me to submit to their journal. But the title of the journal is weirdly generic, and the scope is totally meaningless. The International Journal of Literature and Arts, which keeps researchers in related fields updated. That's it. That's all they say about the journal. That's not a scope. Now they add in some extra flattery again. Apparently I'm basically this genius combination, a cross between Darwin and Newton, perhaps a bit of Picasso thrown in, and basically the most amazing person ever in the world ever. And in fact, the idea is that I'm so wonderful. They not only want me to publish with them, they want me to join their editorial board. Again, clearly, this is a completely ridiculous email. And I'm also at this point supposed to be so overwhelmed with delight that I overlook the bad English, the bad grammar, the bad formatting throughout. I mean, this is bad in any email, but particularly bad to have a badly written, badly grammatically incorrect letter for a literature journal, whose job it is to ensure proper formatting. But anyway, I'm supposed to be so overwhelmed with delight and excitement that I ignore all of this and not notice that it's not even a real person emailing me, but is in fact a gone on too far, but is in fact, you know, it's a generic, there's not even a person there. Normally when it is a person, if you go and research them, they don't exist anyway. In addition, I'm also supposed to be so blinded by excitement that I ignore the highly suspicious nature of their website. Now look at this. This does not look like a great website here. Now, at first glance, particularly to someone who's sort of starting out like an early career researcher who's never published before, this might seem like a legitimate website. We've got a journal title, long archive of content, there's a board, you could submit special issues, there's download statistics, it has a DOI and all this stuff. But on closer investigation, there's loads of issues here. Editors don't appear to exist anywhere but this website. So the people here listed, I've researched, they are nowhere else in the world. As I said, the title is very broad and has international in it, which is always a huge red flag. British, world, American, and international are all used to try and give a false sense of credibility. The scope is very broad, and basically all the scope says is, we publish stuff, publish with us. There's no mention of peer review processes at all. The index includes lots of indexes that don't exist, and also the indexes that they do claim that do exist don't have this journal in them, so it's all lies. They don't follow code guidelines, publication schedule is very erratic, and there's no digital preservation details. Also, this publisher has a large number of very similar titles, many of which are not only generic, but also very, very close to real, legitimate journals published by places like Elsevier and Springer. Now, historically, it was really easy to identify these journals. You know, they look really bad, they didn't have DOIs, they had fake ISSNs, the location might be fake, you know, all this stuff. But predatory journals are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and it's becoming much harder to identify them. Many now have real ISSNs, they have proper cross-ref DOIs, and they can even be well established with multiple issues stretching back many years. Also, some of the duplicitous practices can be very hard to identify, and particularly until after payment has been collected. And here's a comparison offered in a recent Nature article highlighting the difficulty in identifying the fake and the real. And I'm sure if we had time for another activity, it would be interesting to see how many of you were unable to pick out which the real one was and which the fake one was of the two shown here. So given all of that, how can we guarantee legitimacy as the researchers looking for where to publish? Now, there are a lot of lists out there that can, we've all heard of Carball's and Beale's list and stuff. But there's two things to be aware of. One, it is almost impossible to keep them up to date. As we said, there's new journals being published literally every day. But also, crucially, and this is so important, and it's important to what we do at F.O.R.M, it's important to what we do for Knowledge E, and it's also something that's come up a lot in discussions over the last few days, but particularly the decolonization panel this morning, is that these predatory publisher lists unfairly penalize journals from the Global South, because many of the journals from the Global South are legitimate, and they are, in fact, the Global South leads for open access. The Global North is still stuck in the old, outdated print publishing model. Global South hit the ground running and has embraced open access, and that it's truly leading. But what we find is that a number of them, the journal editors and the journal owners, either don't have the knowledge needed to conform to COPE practices, so make inadvertent errors, which might see them end up on, one of these predatory publisher lists, even though they're not actually predatory, or can't afford those high-tech platforms and glossy digital designs. So they might look a bit ropey, they look low quality. Regardless of the quality of the research might be really high and really rigorous, proper academic rigor and thoroughly peer reviewed, but the website might look a bit not great because they don't have the money to do something better, or lack the knowledge and understanding, or lack the digital infrastructures at a national level. So the International Academy Partnership, this is a report I mentioned earlier, they've been working on this problem for some time. And what they've come up with is this spectrum approach, which helps identify a sliding scale of suspicious activity. And this scale ranges from being an outright fake to merely offering poor quality services to obviously high quality services. So the IAP categories include fraudulent journals, which are literally they're illegal criminal activities, such as cloning legitimate journals and setting up fake duplicate websites to extract money, using false identities to solicit submissions, or republishing already published articles from legitimate journals without permission to act as like bait to get more unwitting victims. Then there's the deceptive journals in the middle. While not actively criminal, they can employ deceitful stratagems and provide misleading information. They might pretend they provide peer review, or pretend to be indexed in Scopus, or post a fake impact factor on the website, or hide their real location. They might have a US address as a PO box, but are actually based in another country entirely. And then finally, you've got the low quality journals. These are not actively predatory, but they're not following COPE best practices either. Now, they might offer, as I said, they might offer these poor quality services through ignorance, or it might be an attempt to reduce time and cost of publication. Therefore, they might offer poor peer review, or ignore complaints, or not have proper corrections and retractions notices. And they might also employ those aggressive solicitation practices, which we've already discussed. So a really helpful tool at this point to identify more specific things is Think, Check, Submit. Now, this is an international cross-sector initiative which aims to educate researchers, promote integrity, and build trust in credible research publications. And they offer a big checklist of items to consider, including, do you know the journal? Do your colleagues know the journal? Have you read articles in it? Or do you know people who've published in it? Can you easily identify and contact the publisher? Are peer review processes visible? Do they have indexing and archiving descriptions? And can they be verified? Are there DOIs, fees and waivers described? Do you retain copyright as an author? And is there a clear licensing policy, like which one it is of the open copyright stuff. Is the publisher a member of any of the credible entities? You know, is it a COBO, ASPA, LPSP, one of those? Now, in addition to what Think Check Submit offers, I would add the following. Big ones that are not necessarily an either or, it's a if it does this, it's bad, which would be like, does it make fake claims to indexing? Is there a fake impact factor? Does the journal accept and publish multiple articles by the same author in the same issue? That's a very important one, I think. Is the title overly generic? Is the scope wishy-washy? Does it frequently publish out of scope? Do they send excessively flattering emails? And do they offer unrealistically quick peer review? And in addition to learning the markers of predatory journals, it's also important that as researchers, you rely on other approaches as well. So check the directory of open access journals. They have a very rigorous review process. And by and large, if your journal isn't in DOAJ, the directory itself, there's a good chance it's predatory. So they're a really useful first port of call. Again, ask your colleagues if they've heard anything negative about the journal. You can check the predatory journal list, but as I said, that they're not exhaustive. There's a lot of journals that are predatory that won't be on there, but also sometimes journals that are not predatory will be on there, so they're perhaps less reliable. But also finally, if you're not sure, go looking for a diamond open access publisher. If a journal isn't going to charge you APCs, if they're not trying to get money from you, there's a good chance that they're far more likely to be legitimate anyway, because otherwise, why would they be doing it? So, you know, you can definitely be safe and feel safe with them. Now, ultimately, the fact is, as a researcher, you have created something that is unique and valuable. It might only be valuable for a very small number of people, depending on your field. My field is quite small, so I can say that with authority. There are very few people in my field. But that doesn't reduce the value of my research. It doesn't reduce the value of your research. So don't throw it away with the first publisher who approaches you, because sometimes they're only interested in your money and they won't give you the service and support that you have earned, that you deserve. Ultimately, by publishing in the wrong place, your research will not get the recognition it deserves. But there are lots of guides out there to help with predatory journals, as the academic community is increasingly aware of them and recognizing the damage that they do. And even at the highest level, you know, there's been announcements over the summer that a number of national level bodies, for example, in France and Malaysia, have actively issued statements saying that their researchers cannot publish in journals owned by these publishers. So it's, you know, it's not just something that the individuals are aware of or that the institutions are aware of. At the national level, the governments are becoming aware of journals, and that's great. Where there is a big problem is predatory conferences, and that's what I really want to focus on for the remainder of today. Now, like predatory publishers, predatory conferences are focused on making money, not on supporting scholarship. And these organizers tend to hold lots of low quality events, which have the appearance of being high impact academic conferences when you see them online and register. But though the themes tend to be very broad and quite vague, so they can attract more speakers and get more money. And particularly when you see the websites, it can be very hard to identify them as predatory in advance, as they lie about peer review, lie about attendance and speakers, lie about host and partner organizations, and unsurprisingly, lie about their own commercial status and office location. So they are much harder to deal with and to recognize before you become a victim of them. Now, here's an example. In 2021, WASET, which is a big sort of conference organizer, listed over 300 locations of planned conferences on its website. That's 300 in 1 year, all in large cities or tourist spots. And each of those had many, many conferences happening in each city. And shockingly, in one 2018 study, it was discovered that WASET had organized nearly 50,000 conferences and generated millions of dollars in revenue, money stolen from researchers and research institutions. But when we go to their website, look, they look so glossy and so organized and do so much. Surely they must be legitimate. But actually, in many cases, the scale of the conferences, this number of conferences, is a warning sign, because legitimate organizers are focused on niche research topics, and they just don't. Most of, I mean, there are exceptions. Some of the really, really big global science bodies obviously have the capacity to operate on this scale. but most conference organizers don't. We organize, a few each year in a niche field. I'm sure everyone here recognizes the threat posed by predatory journals and conferences. They are becoming increasingly prevalent, and they are taking advantage of the growing pressures to present and publish caused both by university quotas and job-based performance metrics, and the continued lack of awareness and understanding amongst many researchers. And as we said, COVID has caused a surge, a huge uptick in the problem, not least because many people with virtual events, given that the videos are off and there's no face-to-face meetings, they might never even realize that they've been conned. People don't know that there's a problem. They don't know that they've been stolen from. But predatory conferences don't actually, it's not just about stealing the delegates' money. They also rob delegates of the chance to present their research to an audience of their peers and to gain valuable feedback that will help them get published in the future. The chance to participate in cutting-edge debates in their field, to be at the forefront of new developments, and the career development networking opportunities, which are a huge part of many conference cycles. Some of the big conferences in my field, particularly in America, hiring happens, all the interviews are scheduled during that conference because everyone in the whole industry is there. So if you don't, it's hugely important, hugely valuable, and all of this is being stolen by the predatory conferences. And this is why Knowledge E developed and launched the Think, Check, Attend initiative back in 2017 to help researchers identify and avoid all the predatory conference organizers lurking in the academic ecosystem and waiting to pounce on the unwary. Now, Think, Check, Attend is, as you might have guessed from the name, a sister initiative to Think, Check, Submit. And really, our core goal is to raise awareness about predatory conferences and stop researchers losing money, wasting time, and missing out on those valuable career development opportunities by choosing the wrong conference. And there's 3 simple steps to what we do, which is encourage people to think about whether this is the right conference for them to attend and present their research. We ask researchers to use our handy checklist to evaluate the conference and determine whether it is legitimate and whether the organizers are trustworthy. And finally, we advise researchers to only attend a verified, credible conference that offers valuable networking, discussion, and career advancement opportunities. And researchers considering attending an event can visit the website and use the conference checker tool to assess the conference they're considering attending. Now, our current format, which is the one we established back in 2017, is very simple. It's a simple, easy to use checklist of criteria with yes, no answer options. Yes equals 1 point and no equals 0 points. And high scoring conferences that display more credibility markers are good, whereas low scoring conferences don't display credibility markers and therefore considered predatory. However, as the recent IAP report highlighted, predatory conference organizers are becoming increasingly sophisticated in their techniques, and it's becoming harder and harder and harder to identify them, especially as many of the characteristics identified in the report are only revealed during the event or after payment has been collected. So, for example, failing to conduct rigorous peer review of abstract proposals. There's no way we can find out about that. Having a disproportionately high acceptance rate or a low attendance rate. Again, no AI is someone reading the conference paper like the call for papers. There's no way I'm going to know that. Named keynotes to not turn up, or they were never actually involved and their name has been stolen, or the event is cancelled with limited notice and there's no refund. None of these can be identified in advance. And it's even harder to spot the fakes because we said many well-established legitimate conferences don't display any credibility markers at all, perhaps because the organizers are not tech literate or because the event is in a small subfield where everyone knows each other, so organizers rely on Word documents and word of mouth instead of websites. So what we're doing now is developing and improving the conference checker tool and currently working on new metrics based on the spectrum approach proposed by the IAP report. And this will entail a much more complex scoring system with different categories which can be rated individually. And so currently I've identified over 300 markers, credibility markers. And we have to say, we really had hoped to be able to use this workshop today to launch the revised Think, Check, Attend and show you and allow you all to play with it as an activity. But unfortunately, we are running a little behind. F.O.R.M organization for the annual forum took over, and we don't have quite as much time as we would have liked to prepare everything. But our hope is that within the next month, we will be able to launch a much more effective tool to identify and combat modern predatory conference practices. And so although I can't show you the finished tool and allow you to play with it, my hope is, I want to talk about some of the new characteristics that we've identified so that you can at least be aware of the potential indicators of a predatory conference. Sorry, I should have done that before. So the key focuses that we're looking at, the key focus of our warning signs right now are organizer credibility, academic credibility, pre-event logistics, in-event logistics, and publication credibility. And within this, we've broken our checklist down into 8 sections. So there's organizer details and reputation, event details and reputation, submission and selection, cost and cancellation, logistics, program and presenters, past event performance, and publication. Now, I'm not going to run you through all 300 indicators because we don't have the time and you would all fall asleep. But I'm just going to give you some of the highlights because I think they are important. And also, we will be distributing these slides afterwards if you are interested. And also, for this in particular, I am more than happy to talk to anyone about this in more detail because I think it's a really important issue. And we'd be very interested in getting people's insights. So around organizer reputation, I'm just going to run through these quite quickly because I think I'd like to be able to give you all some time for Q&A at the end. But one of the big things is, do you know the organizing body? Are they reputable with strong academic credentials and affiliations, or are they commercial? Do they have professional profiles or scholarly profiles that you can look at? You know, if I organize a conference, you can go and see me, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can see on my academic front what I publish, on ORCID, you can see on the professional front what I work in on F.O.R.M and various other things. I exist and my scholarly profiles are relevant to the conferences that I organize. You can verify my institutional affiliation and my institution by going to those websites. You can verify my academic qualifications and you can see where I've published and you can see my contact address and it is legitimate. Now, these are really important because I am a real legitimate person. And when I organize a conference, they are real and legitimate. But if you're a fake conference organizer, none of this would be verifiable. It would either be fake or just not discoverable. You wouldn't be able to find any of it at all. Likewise with communication, you know, does the conference organizer or the specific event, either the overall organizer if they do something each year or the specific event, do they have a good social media presence? Do the people who follow them and the people they engage with, are they people that you also follow or have read, you know, are they in your field? Do you know them? Do you cite them? Do you meet them at conferences? Do the social media accounts show genuine knowledge of the field? And is it relevant to your field? Like, you know, is the conference connected? And the conference organizer is connected with what you do? Can you get in touch and get a rapid response? Have you or someone you trust attended an event by these people before? You know, do they host lots of conferences in different fields, which is a big red flag? Not if they're adjacent fields, you know, if they're all under physical sciences or something, but if they're doing physics one day and education another and healthcare the next, then it's not necessarily a hard red flag, but it's certainly a concern. What about the academic credibility? And I think, again, this is very important. Again, I won't run through all of this because, as you can see, it's quite a lot there. But this is so important, you know, that the call for papers is detailed and well written, that it has a clear focal point and purpose, and that really that there is a clear rationale for the event and a clearly defined contribution, not just the International Conference of Healthcare to drive healthcare development internationally, which means nothing, but specifically drilling in and going, you know, this conference is, for example, the annual forum. The focus of the annual forum is to support the development and implementation of open science policies and practices in higher education in the Arab region. That is a very, very specific criteria, and all the papers that we presented are linked with that. Does the organizer ask for institutional affiliations? You know, are they asking you for all the things that they should be asking you for? If they're not asking you for them, then I would be concerned. And this is a big one, actually, the deadlines. Is the CFP, the call for paper deadline, suspiciously close to the event. Because if it's less than a month before the event, preferably 2 or 3 months before the event, there's no way they're conducting proper peer review, which means they're just accepting any old paper. On that note, did they tell you that there's peer review? Do they tell you who's going to be peer reviewing it? Do you receive reports? Is the peer review report detailed? Is it relevant? Is it generic, or is it clearly been tailored to your paper? Then there's all of the, invitations. If they've invited you by email and it's a solicitation email similar to the one I showed you for journals, then that's a huge red flag. Also, the academic and scientific committee, it is really important to check, A, that they exist, run through that committee list, type them into LinkedIn, look at them on ORCID. Do they exist at all? And if they exist, do they confirm, if you reach out to them or if you look at what they say that they're doing in the coming weeks, months, do they mention this conference? Because so often now, these conference organizers are looking for people with big shiny names in the field, and they just say that, Professor so-and-so, director of faculty, whatever, is attending, and it's not actually true. If you contact that person, they've never even heard of the conference. And also the past events, if they're the latest in the series, do look at the past events and see the quality, look at the feedback from them on social media from the previous event. Event logistics, look at the funders, do they exist? Are they reputable? Do they, again, confirm involvement? Fees are so important. Is the organizer clear and transparent about the conference costs? And crucially, are the fees higher and the deliverables lower than other events in your field? Do they charge you to submit? And do they charge an extra fee for non-attendee co-authors? Are the higher fees to speak than to attend? Can you pay extra to be considered for an award? Those are all bad signs. Good signs are student discounts, grants and bursaries, and a good cancellation policy. So there's a lot to look for there. Likewise, the program, is it well structured and active, or is it quite empty? Are speakers asked to chair panels outside their field? Are they good relevant papers, or are they bad and all over the place and just look, not great? And also practical planning. A good conference organizer is going to support you with the conference. They're going to tell you how to find visas, how to travel, where the hotels are, and things like that. Unfortunately, the next category is impossible to help with beforehand, but it gives you the questions to ask other people who have been at previous events. So, was attendance low? Were the papers poor? The named keynote or people didn't turn up? The organizers didn't turn up? There were no sponsors, no one in your field. Crucially, no one whose work you've read was there. People about unrelated disciplines talking about unrelated topics. Because this is a key thing. Some of these events, they might on different websites say, oh, we're hosting the International Maths Conference in this hotel on this day. Same hotel room, same day, they'll also be hosting the International English Conference, the International Psychology Conference. And none of you know until you turn up and there's 12 people in the room and 2 of them are talking about literature, 2 of them are talking about maths, and 5 of them are talking about science. And it's technically, though, it's the same conference. Or it's a low quality venue. And, there's just a lot of logistics that you can't discover before, which is why it's really important, these questions to ask people who might have attended something by these people before. Now, finally, their publishing claims. So in addition to all the things that we've already mentioned with the predatory journals, there's some things that conference organizers do, because conference organizers often now link it with publishing because they can get more money from you. Ultimately, it's unfortunate, but that's why they do it. So in addition to all the journal issues that we discussed before, here's some of the things that I would suggest are concerning. Again, none of them are 100% red flags by and large, but it is worth being aware of them. First of all, when they request money for publishing at the registration fee, before you've even submitted your paper, let alone your final article, before anything's been reviewed, they're effectively already guaranteeing publication and taking money from you.
Dr. Emily?
Yes.
I think we are having a problem with the sound.
Oh dear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you back. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. I will speak up a bit more. Another one is, do they claim indexing and journal specifics, and can these publishing claims be verified? Have you heard of these journals? Have you read content in them? Basically, there's just so much. Is the journal relevant? Does the journal have all of these things that we've been talking about before? I've just noticed the time, so I apologize. I get very excited about this topic and talk a lot about it. So yes, publisher credibility is very important. If it looks dodgy, then again, it's likely if they're publishing in a dodgy place, then the publisher themselves, the organizer, is also probably a bit dodgy. So finally, at the end, I think what you really need to think about when you're attending a conference is this. These are the 4 things. When you've done all the research and you've finished, when a lovely conference checker tool is ready and you can use it, once you've gone through everything and the results pop up, these are the 4 things you need to think about. Is there a credible opportunity for meaningful academic exchange? Will attending this conference help you network with relevant peers in your field? Will attending allow you to promote your research and build your reputation within your field? And finally, will attending enable you to gain valuable insights into key new developments in your field? If the answer is no, then don't go, ultimately. But remember, as with predatory journals, this is a spectrum. So if you hear about a conference and you've not been before, just take a minute and stop and think and check before deciding whether or not to go. And in the meantime, don't give up on open access publishing and attending conferences, because remember, there are so many benefits from these earlier slides. You know, it's good for you as a researcher, it's good for universities, it's more accessible, so more reads and citations, and it offers more routes for promotion and greater potential impact.